The Haitian Revolution.
In plain English.
By Matt Halfrika, Jackie Jaffness, Danielle Keyser, and
1791. The United States is newly a republic in the Western Hemisphere. Europe is in frenzy because the French Revolution is slowly spreading to the lands of France. The French are preparing to write the Declaration of the Rights of Man. This is similar to the Declaration of Independence because it declared rights, liberty, and equality to all.
On the Caribbean island of Haiti, the people were keeping a close eye on the activities occurring across the Atlantic in France. There was much uncertainty across the Atlantic, and the French Revolution was anyone's game. The country was deeply divided.
While the planters were closely monitoring the revolution in France, they were completely oblivious of the revolution fermenting at home in Haiti. The French sugar and coffee plantations offered horrible conditions for African American slaves. For every ton of sugar produced, 5 slaves' lives were lost.
The coffee and sugar plantations of Haiti differed from North American plantations in one key element. The Haitian plantations required much more hard labor than the plantations of North America. Because these plantations needed large quantities of laborers, the slave population outnumbered the French colonists by thousands. Due to the large amounts of African slaves, they kept much of their cultural values and beliefs. Thus, the French social system did not establish itself in Haiti. Even though the French were aware of the American and French revolutions, they were completely oblivious to the revolution brewing in Haiti.
On August 22, 1971, the Haitian War of Independence began under the leadership of a religious leader named Bookman. There were more than 100,000 slaves that rose up against the French. The French were immensely outnumbered. Unlike the French and American revolutions, the Haitian War was driven by men and women who had been enslaved for their whole lives.
Haitians did not only want liberty, they also wanted revenge against the French who forced them into slavery and treated them horribly on the sugar and coffee plantations. Over the next couple of weeks, the ex-slaves set fire to every plantation in the fertile land of Haiti and killed all Frenchmen that they encountered. The remaining Frenchmen fled to coastal towns where they begged the French government to get them off to the island.
Please get me out of
The
here!
outstanding hero of the Haitian Revolution, who was also considered a strong general during this time, was Francois Dominique Toussaint Overture. Toussaint Overture was often compared to George Washington and Napoleon Bonaparte. Contrary to popular belief, Toussaint Overture did not have a part in the original Haitian Revolution. When the fighting of the Haitian Revolution broke out in August of 1791, Toussaint Overture was 50 years old. With the revolution, Toussaint Overture discovered a passion within himself to free himself from the French influence. Toussaint Overture realized that the slaves needed a more formidable structure to defeat the French, so he entered the revolution by training a small group of military.
Pretty soon, the Haitian slaves found themselves caught between major battling forces that all wanted to control Haiti under their rule. The Spanish and English powers wanted to obtain Haiti, however, Toussaint aligned himself and the slaves with the French powers. This masterminded idea kept Haiti under the French control. This friendship lasted until 1803, when the French arrested Toussaint and brought him back to France, where he later died in his prison cell.
Following Toussaint's death, the next revolutionist became Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Dessalines, unlike Toussaint, was enraged by his treatment as a slave. He did not want to ever see slavery returned to Haiti. The next fight in the revolution was between Charles Leclerc and Dessalines. Leclerc was the brother-in-law of Napoleon. This battle was known as the Battle of Vertieres. It was perhaps the most horrifying and gruesome battle in the Haitian Revolution. On Leclerc's side, his army was weakened by both guerrilla warfare and attacks and the yellow fever.
During this time, slaves were killed whenever and wherever the French could get their hands on them. Later on, Leclerc's successor, Jean-Baptiste Rochambeau, took over and decided to keep things running as they were. Dessalines told his troops that all harm done by the French would soon come back around to the French. But as the fighting continued, Dessalines decided those who did not accept the new revolutionary government would be executed.
A little later, on November 28, 1803, Rochambeau finally surrendered, and it was then that Dessalines announced Haiti to be sovereign empire. Dessalines became the first and last emperor of Haiti because he was assassinated. Henry Christophe later became the first president of the state of Haiti. To form the Haitian flag we all know today, Dessalines removed the white stripe of the French flag to create the dual-colored flag of the Haitian island.
The Haitians declared their independence from France, North American plantations owners immediately felt pressure. The Haitian Revolution suddenly changed the equation that had been operating in the North. North American slave owners started to notice the ticking time bomb they were sitting on. And finally, on January 1st of 1863, President Abraham Lincoln declared the freedom of over 4 million North American slaves.